My name is Peter. In 2010, my girlfriend and I moved into a rental apartment in Rotterdam. At the time, I was a hardcore skeptic. Ghosts, spirits, the paranormal? Nonsense. Or so I thought. The apartment had a strange attic, filled with forgotten belongings left by previous tenants. We put the washing machine up there and used the nearby room as our bedroom. Another attic room we used for ironing. From the moment we moved in, my girlfriend said she felt something dark in the house. At night, she'd wake up and see a shadowy male figure standing at the foot of our bed. I shrugged it off. Probably just dreams, I told her. Then things escalated. A friend of hers visited one day. She had no idea what my girlfriend had been experiencing, but out of nowhere she said, "There's a man in this house. Something dark." That's when I started paying attention. One afternoon, my girlfriend was napping on the couch. Suddenly, she got up and began walking toward the attic. I followed, calling her name. She didn't respond. Her eyes were open, but it was like she was sleepwalking. Then she suddenly came to and looked horrified. She told me she'd been dreaming of the same house, but back in the 1960s or 70s. In the dream, there were broken wine glasses on the floor, spilled drinks, and a woman screaming. She heard two angry male voices upstairs and felt someone was being attacked. She was about to go find out when I woke her. It was chilling for both of us. For a while, the weirdness stayed mostly with her. But everything changed when we began preparing to move out. One evening, I was lying in bed in the attic bedroom. I heard someone walking up the stairs. The light in the hall switched on. I assumed it was my girlfriend coming to say hi. I waited, but no one came. The sound stopped. Curious, I got up and opened the door. No one was there. I went downstairs. My girlfriend was sitting calmly in the living room. "Why didn't you come say hi?" I asked. She looked confused. She said, "I didn't go upstairs, I thought you did." That moment hit me like a punch. I felt my entire body go cold. For the first time, I was truly afraid. She was so unsettled, she left to sleep at her mother's. I stayed. I refused to be chased out of my own place. That night, around 1 a.m., I was jolted awake by a knock. Not just any knock. It came from inside the wall, right next to my head. I'd lived there nearly 3 years. I knew every sound that house made. This was new and terrifying. I froze. I wanted to get up, but I couldn't move. I just pulled the blanket over my head and lay there, questioning everything I believed. What does this thing want from me? How is this even possible? From that night on, it only got worse. We began losing things, keys, personal items, only to have them reappear days later in plain sight. It was maddening. The presence wasn't just there anymore, it was interacting with us. We reached out to a psychic for help. By then, we were already sleeping elsewhere. She told us to return to the house and with calm and kindness, guide the spirit toward the light. No fear, no hate, she said. Just tell it you can't help and it needs to move on. We did as she instructed. That night, sitting in the attic, we gently spoke our words. And then 3 thunderous bangs slammed into the attic door. It was violent, aggressive, terrifying. We bolted from the house. I swear something followed us in the car for a short while. When we told the psychic, she simply said, "It's not going anywhere. Don't return at night." Soon after, we moved out. And from the moment we stopped sleeping there, the activity stopped. I went in a skeptic. I left knowing that something else exists, something real, something powerful, and it doesn't care whether you believe in it or not. At firstly I said, "My name is Laura." And it was 6 days after my 22nd birthday, the year 2017, and my boyfriend at the time decided to get us a dog. I've always loved animals but could never own a pet as a child, so finally owning a pet was an ecstatic experience for me. The days after my birthday I filled with finding all these new trails in NYC parks and spending hours upon hours outside playing with the puppy. Her name was Reese's. Mostly in Riverside Park because at the time we lived in a shared townhouse right outside Riverside. That night, my boyfriend was out on a dinner work party, leaving me home alone with Reese's. I've never liked being outside at night alone. It's not very safe as a woman, so I was very hesitant to even step outside to walk her. Every time I tried to slip on my sandals, I got this foreboding, ominous feeling that something very, very bad was outside. However, I eventually mustered enough courage to get out since Reese's was scratching the door and clearly needed to use the bathroom. When I walked outside, the darkness completely enveloped us. Even with the lampposts, the air seemed heavy. Now, I may remember this only because I was so nervous, but the moment we walked into Riverside, things started to get weird. NYC has always had a homeless issue, so it was no surprise to see groups of homeless huddling around some trees, doing God knows what. Around 5 minutes into our walk, Reese's starts pulling my hand, holding the leash like I've simply never felt before, even now that I own a Great Dane. Mind you, Reese's was a small 20-pound miniature poodle. She pulls me up one of the hills and doesn't stop until we reach a small area of wood, which is unusual because Riverside is incredibly vast and doesn't have many wooded areas. She pulls me into the forest area and suddenly it is pitch black, no lampposts in sight, nothing. At this point I'm getting really freaked out, but Reese's just won't stop pulling, and since we're going down a slope, it would be nearly dangerous to try and pull her back up it. I keep following her to the bottom of this ditch-like hill. In all my years of living in NYC, I've seen nothing like this hill in Riverside, until she stops dead. She sniffs around, and it suddenly becomes very clear to me that we are either standing in shit or very close to it. I pull out the flashlight and what I see has terrified me for years. There was a potty, like the things children use, and a cardboard box around a tree. Me being curious, I approach the box, and inside is a large serrated knife, a dildo, and a pocket pussy. I look around us and realize there are torn pages from porn magazines stomped into the muddy area, many containing plus-sized women. I clearly remember kneeling down to look at one, and I'm not sure if it was the fear coursing through my body, but there was something very wrong about these pages. They did not have colorful/stimulating colors. Instead, these women were surrounded by completely black voids, and on one page a woman had on underwear the same shade of black around her, making it look like her groin was a part of that void. Not to mention that on some of the torn magazine pages there were drawings from a red marker, many of which had covered their eyes in red. I myself am very spiritual and am very aware of different energies and managing them. Something there was not right. At this point I'm starting to get really freaked out, knowing I've walked right into a very bad person's den, when I hear footsteps in the mud. I've told people this, and sometimes they say maybe I imagined the footsteps, but I know what I heard. I even remember the sound of their shoes, and it was unmistakably flip-flops because I heard the flap of when the shoe hits your ankle. Some people I've told thought it was maybe a park ranger with boots on. I've never felt as desperate to get out of a place before, and I grab Reese's in my arms and run up the hill. I don't stop running until I reach my doorstep, where I run inside and lock all the doors. I waited all night for my boyfriend to get back home, and even after I was outside that park I felt uneasy. When he came home I told him all about it, and he suggested I call the police because of the knife. The next day we walked down to Riverside, hoping Reese's will pull us back to the place, but she doesn't. We spent all day in that park trying to find the same place so that we could take photos of the knife and turn it in. We never found it. A week following, we tried to find it again and even asked people if they knew of a ditch, but nobody knew anything. I'm not sure what's more unsettling, what I found in that ditch or the fact I could never find it again. It still haunts me to this day, and I can only wonder what that knife was used for. People have said maybe it was a weapon for a homeless person to protect themselves, but there was something wrong in that area. There was a bad energy even when I stepped out of my door. If there are any other New Yorkers reading this, do you know anything of a ditch in Riverside? Maybe I'll go out and look for it again. I know I'll never fully be able to sleep soundly until I know for sure that place is of existence. This happened recently too. About a week ago, me and my girlfriend had taken a trip to Sandusky's Cedar Point for the Halloween Fright Nights, as we are both a fan of horror and thrill rides. Of course, we picked probably the worst weekend to go, as it literally broke the record for the park's busiest weekend. Most of the rides were over 2-hour waits at times, and we became fed up and decided to leave the park. We were trying to come up with things to do as we looked up the local area, when we stumbled upon some local haunting legends, one of which stood out to us. About 30 minutes from Sandusky is a place called Gore Orphanage Road in Vermilion, Ohio. You can look it up on your own, but to keep the story short, I'll briefly explain. Gore Orphanage Road had an actual orphanage, or so the story goes, that burned down with a ton of kids and caretakers inside. Many people have experienced hauntings there and ghost activity in the ruins. There's also nearby a bridge where a woman threw her baby off the side and killed him, called Crybaby Bridge. As we kept digging, we read a lot of scary stories, including one about a murder that happened there where a woman was hung in the woods, and even supposedly a satanic cult that does rituals in the woods have been spotted from time to time. We, of course, thought nothing of it. Just scary stories meant to scare people, right? Our original plan was to go there at night, but because we were so bored, and we had read that people were getting in trouble from the police going at night, we decided to just go at dusk, just before it got dark. Our plan was to park at the bridge and make the half-mile hike to the park where the orphanage ruins are, and see if we experience anything, and then go back to our hotel with some spooky stories to tell our friends. So right before the bridge is a little side dirt spot to park. So we park and get out of the car and lock it. We walk over the bridge and don't experience anything on the bridge. So we kept going to the park. On the left side of the road is an embankment covered in trees, and on the right is a cornfield. Typical country road. However, the closer we got to the park, the more we started to smell fire. At one point, as we got a few hundred feet from the park, the temperature changed from brisk 50s to very warm, despite there being more shade. We both looked at each other and commented at how warm it got all of a sudden and kept moving. We enter the park and immediately see some markers from where the old orphanage used to be, so we stop and take some pictures. We were both extremely quiet to see if we could hear or see anything out of the ordinary. The first thing we noticed is there is a constant regular knocking on the trees. We began to feel a bit uneasy at this point as we started to venture the park. We didn't want to get lost, so we stuck to the preordained path and would point out the building rubble as we went. At one point, both me and my partner heard a child screaming, which stopped both of us in our tracks. As we kept walking in, I smelled perfume, like somebody had sprayed it right in front of me, but not my girlfriend's perfume. And at one point I heard something crunching leaves right behind my girlfriend, so we both stopped and I took a photo. caught nothing in the photo, but it was enough for us to decide to leave. We both felt queasy being there and it was starting to get dark, so we decided to head back. You'd think that that's the scariest part of the story, but it's not. As we were leaving, two cars pulled up to the entrance of the park, which freaked us out a little bit. So we started to walk back to the car, partially because we were on edge and partially because we are socially awkward and didn't want a stranger encounter in a park. As we were walking back to the car, an older blue and white pickup truck comes careening around the corner, burning rubber. Probably going around 55 in a 30 miles per hour little small road. The guy pulls up to me, rolls his window down and says something along the lines of, "I almost just made a mistake," and laughed and then peeled off, tires spinning as he took off. I had assumed he was just a redneck who wanted approval for the cool drift he just did, or he was drunk, so I thought nothing of it. My girlfriend, however, who is great at reading character, starts power walking back to the car. About 2 minutes later, the truck pulls back up to us coming from the other way, slamming on his brakes next to us. Just staring. As we kept walking, he kept inching his truck closer to us. We both look over and he, with one little creepy finger, motions for my girlfriend to come here. I managed to get a better look at him, and his face could only be described as unsettling. He had very greasy, receding thin hair that was caked on his forehead, and a creepy grin on that I still can mentally picture. This, of course, sets me off, as now I too am bothered by this guy, so I sort of get in between the truck and her and wave him off. He gets mad, does a burnout with his tires, and takes off over the bridge. After that, we cooked it back to the car, and immediately locked the doors after we got in. I pulled the car around and we left. We didn't speak for something like 10 minutes. Just in shock. You know that I'm scared of something when as I'm driving I keep checking the rear view mirrors. I was terrified that guy was going to follow us back to our hotel room. So the entire 45-minute drive I spent checking the rear view every chance I got. Now I don't know what that guy's intentions were. Whether he just wanted to talk to us or whether he had planned on kidnapping us. I'm not sure, but we are very lucky that he didn't have a gun. We're also lucky there were other people nearby and it was still daylight. If we had gone at night and were the only ones there, we may not have been so lucky. I may not have been here to tell this tale. I fully now believe the stories of Gore Orphanage. If you are ever in the Vermilion, Ohio area, do not go to Gore Orphanage alone. Or even go, period. If you do decide to go, do not go at night, and if you see a blue and white old pickup truck, run. You may not get lucky like we did. This is long, so I apologize, but here it goes. I was working at Burger King my senior year of high school. This event happened sometime during the spring of 1993. I usually worked late on Friday and Saturday nights because the drive-thru was opened until 1 a.m. I was usually the last employee to leave. When it was time for me to go, my manager, Eric, would walk me to the door and watch me until I arrived at my car. Then he would lock the door and go back to his office to finish the paperwork. Well, this particular night, he told me he was behind and he was trying to leave because he had something to do. So, he walked me out and asked if he could simply lock the door and run back to his office. Not watch me walk to my car. I told him this was fine, I was fine, no problem. That is when it all began. Eric opened the door for me, I walked out, yelled back, "Good night," and took off walking to my car. I heard him locking the door. I looked back and he was running to his office. We usually parked far away to give the customers the best parking spots, so I was walking for like 20 seconds when I heard a noise. It sounded like a plastic bag in the wind. I immediately thought I left some trash on the sidewalk. Maybe someone forgot to throw it in the dumpster, so I turned around and looked at the grounds surrounding the building. I saw nothing. I kept walking towards my car. I kept hearing the noise. So then I turned and looked up. I saw the strangest thing. It looked like there was a large black trash bag blowing in the wind on the roof of Burger King. It looked like the bag was stuck on something. I was racking my brain trying to remember if there is anything protruding from our building, an antenna, some kind of beams. Anything? I couldn't think of what could have made that bag get stuck. Then I paid attention to the size. It looked as though someone was standing there with a huge plastic bag caught on the side of their body. I could make out the shape of a person. I looked towards the bottom to see if there were legs or feet. This thing was completely covered by this plastic-looking material, blowing in the wind. Now, our parking lot lights were off, so it was dark where I was standing. But there is a car dealership behind Burger King, so this thing looking down at me was backlit with tons of white light from this huge dealership. I looked at the bottom of this thing and there was nothing for this plastic-looking material to get caught on. Like, it seemed to be hovering because I could see light coming through under this thing. No legs, no antenna, no beams, nothing. Our roof is flat and there was nothing to connect the roof to this thing. I could see light under it with nothing else. I got a very strange feeling as if I was being watched. I felt as if I shouldn't take my eyes off of this thing. But I needed to make sure I wasn't seeing things. Very quickly, I looked down at the front door I had just left, to see if Eric was coming out or visible in any way. But I saw nothing. It was about 1:30 a.m., so there was not a lot of traffic. I walked backward towards my car. This was in 1993 and I had a 1987 Dodge Omni, so I had to put the key into the locked door. Before key fobs or anything fancy like that. I never took my eyes off of this thing. I unlocked my car, got in, and drove away, all while never taking my eyes off of it. I drove home and I had this ugly feeling that this thing was following me. I kept looking up at the sky, I guess though it could fly since it was on the roof. I drove into my driveway, ran inside and locked the door. My family was asleep, so I stood at my door looking out, making sure it didn't follow me. It took me years to say anything to my family. When I finally did, my cousin, who said she dabbled in white magic, told me that was very dark black magic. She asked if there had ever been someone who harassed me or wanted to be with me. I looked at her and remembered another time while working at Burger King. There was an older man. I was only 18 when I worked there, so this guy must have been in his 30s. He would go and buy a medium tea and then sit there for hours and getting free refills. We all knew this guy. Then after a while he would insist I give him my number. He wanted to date. He would not stop. I had to get my managers to kick him out. Police were called. Anyway, he finally stopped coming. I told my cousin this and she says that thing I saw was him. That there are some people will go to lengths to get what they want. She said that I must have a very large and protective angel because this was a very bad thing to do. This thing left me alone because I was protected by something it could not win against. I said, "Yes, ma'am, it was my Jesus." I don't know if her explanation of this is true, but it sure freaked me out enough that I don't talk about it much and wonder if anyone else has had this kind of experience. Years later, when I saw the movie Jeepers Creepers, that thing reminded me of the thing I saw, except imagine it covered in a thin plastic black bag.